should lullaby.
You've all been waiting for this video for months now, and now it's finally happening. The dispel, romance, and shipping of the Loud House. This ended up becoming one of my biggest ideals on making Loud House material ever since Nani.the.tigress came out, and after doing the villains video, people were really wanting this video to happen in comparison to the toxicity video, which, judging of how the toxicity is what I'm focusing more in this fandom than anything else, most of the things in the fandom are mostly the least of my problems. So when it comes to the shipping and romance material in this, it's mostly going to be brief on some of the topics, including the last topics of this video, if you know what I mean. I'm really thankful that I've gotten everything I need for this entire project, because as far as I'm concerned, it wasn't easy, especially the Lincoln section when it comes to the other two pairings that he had in the live action show. That really sums up a lot that the dedication I did in this video shows, since that some people may not remember the Really Loud House, but at the same time, they don't want anything to do with it due to how bad it was. But since that it does include the Lincoln section when it comes to his pairings with two characters that we're going to be getting to hours later, you missed out on Lincoln's development, and yet I don't blame you for how they made Lincoln a terrible boyfriend when it comes to the first girlfriend, and when it comes to the second, well, people really need to see more of that just to understand that they managed to succeed on making Lincoln a good boyfriend, but not completely. Also, I'm gonna be including fan art to represent the ships and romances themselves, and this will also include the infamous ships, but the pics, while disturbing, not too disturbing, if you know what I mean. So here's the rundown. We're gonna be starting with the oldest sibling, Loie, to the longest sibling, Lucy, and then after that, we're gonna be entering the miscellaneous section, since while there isn't much to discuss those shippings and pairings to give themselves a section of their own, there's still a lot of ships that people may not notice in the fandom, but at the same time, it's worth discussing, knowing full well that the shipping in this show is gigantic than any other cartoon in any other franchise. Truthfully, this is one of the reasons why the fandom of the Loud House is continuing in a way, but it's also a war zone for basically everyone due to people attacking other people for basically being into a ship that they're not into when it comes to their own ships. And as far as I'm concerned, I've been through it a few times. So honestly, the despair in the title of the video is a showcase that there's literally no winner, to where that the war zone in this is basically a huge battleground compared to anything else outside of this show. And judging of how the show isn't committed on having one of the characters to be paired with someone that the fan base is growing towards, that is saying a lot. So let's waste a little time and let's get into the first pairing, Loie and Bobby, as I promised in my Loie and Bobby breakup video that it will be the first to discuss. Since the beginning of this show, these two were an established couple, and I wasn't into it when it started, but it grew on me. So it really gave me a better appreciation in the later seasons, not the breakup arc. We're gonna be getting back to it later when it comes to Living the Dreamboat. So the main reason of me being into this ship is mainly of how healthier it got compared to how it was established in the earlier seasons, specifically season 1. It's pretty obvious what episode I'm referring to, which I did talk about in the past. Save the Date. Even to this day, this is one of the worst episodes from season 1, and a bad introduction of Bobby himself. This is where we get the reveal that Bobby and Ryan are siblings to each other, and with how it was executed when it comes to the first breakup between him and Lori, it's badly executed. This may be new with Lori, with her being into a relationship with a boy, which it does explore much in season 3. It doesn't change the fact that Bobby is dumping Lori due to something that it wasn't really her fault, and yet the episode makes her look worse by forcing Lincoln to be in a romantic relationship with Ryan, which, truth be told, it's not going to make things better, not to mention that Lori did saw Ryan punched Lincoln in Heavy Metal. This really felt like a retcon that people didn't notice back then since the show was brand new, but nearly 10 years later, Lori not seeing Ryan in person and not picking up the pieces right away shows how poorly aged Heavy Metal is, and I'm sorry. Lincoln is never in the wrong in this position, and the fact that Lori didn't think about this sooner just sums up a lot that she's been thinking about Bobby, but in an unhealthier way. Namely, her getting what she wants by any means necessary, and I always think that her development with him in season 3 when it comes to one of the Lola episodes really makes this a little bit more difficult for me to feel sympathy towards. It's one thing that she is dealing with a breakup that she had no control of, but on the other hand, it does showcase that Bobby was badly executed, especially with this being his debut episode. Okay, granted, he may appear before in some occasions, specifically the poor episode, but on the other hand, when it comes to this episode, he is one of the main characters. And truthfully, it's really difficult for me to see this couple as a healthier couple due to how everything was established in this episode. To where Bobby can't be able to think of what's better for Ryan, not to mention that he doesn't even realize that Ryan is picking on Lincoln, and the fact that when all this is dropped later on with the whole Lincoln and Ryan bit, it really makes this episode age less poorly than it should. In the Lincoln section, Lincoln and Ryan will be the first to discuss, since that, looking at it on its own, it's really impossible to admit that this is one of the best ships, to where even the characters being the same age is really unavoidable of criticism and toxicity. So, getting back on a positive note, after Save the Date, the romance between Lori and Bobby improved to where it grew on me, and you can instantly see that they're attempting to make this pairing work on its own without including Lincoln and Ryan. In Cheater by the Dozen, it's been revealed that Bobby isn't really cheating on Lori, unlike what Lori's siblings think, and it does establish that Bobby is smarter, which really sums up a lot that what we're gonna be witnessing from his character later on. It could be either a bad thing, but mostly a sad thing as well. Really, watching these episodes showcases Bobby's maturity to where his stupidity isn't really fully shown, to where that when you watch the spin-off and you see his character, despite good moments here and there, it's odd to think that with the whole pairing between him and Lori would actually work, which I'm willing to believe that, because there are layers to this pairing that can actually make it work, but at times, The dispel nature is that the reality, it won't even walk. When Ryan made the choice to stay at Great Lake City by moving in, which is what Bobby does, this is a big impact on Lori's life, to where she won't be able to meet Bobby here and now, to where that she had to take Lincoln along in order to prevent the moving from happening, which, less said about that, the better. It's gonna be really impossible to think that any of this would work out in the long run. And with the introduction of the Casagrande themselves, honestly, I really feel bad for Lori in this situation, to where that she's gonna have to deal with the reality of her boyfriend moving far away from her, to where it'll lead to more shenanigans, but at the same time trying to make the romance between her and Bobby work. But that's something that really made this pairing work out in the long run, just to showcase that Bobby is attempting to move forward in life, which I'm willing to believe that after thinking about it in the breakup arc, but with how little development that he gets in comparison to Lori, there's more of a reason onto why the breakup arc still didn't win me over with these details in mind. The thing is, when you witness these ideals back in 2018, since that's the year that this episode came out, specifically City Slickers, you can imagine of what direction that they would have taken when it comes to this pairing. And while the breakup arc does showcase of that, and it may be better late than never, I always feel like that they only did these in order to have some kind of continuation, but with the poorly written the breakup arc was, it's kind of difficult to admit that it was a long time coming, but at the same time, not really. In Missed Connection, it's really Lori and Bobby attempting to get along, and yet at the same time, so many things are happening to well. They keep having so many miscommunications, and this episode did show me that these two characters do have problems in their relationship in a healthier way that a relationship in real life would go through. It does showcase that a couple isn't 100% perfect, but not in the save the date kind of way. It always makes me to believe that they're trying to make this work despite living far away from each other, and yet it does showcase Lori being a nicer character to where the more she looks into Bobby, the more that she really wants to marry him. And the same thing applies to Bobby. Like, it's one thing that the first episode together, Save the Date, was badly executed, but as the series progressed, it made the couple more healthier to where the shippers really wanted these two characters to get married. Like, granted, there are other shippers who want the other characters to get married, but when it comes to the show itself in canon, it's a possibility that these two characters would most likely get married. For me, The Loudest Thanksgiving really concluded on the relationship on being close as a couple. With this being the first time I watched The Loud House, not to mention the first episode I reviewed, I always figured that back then I didn't really get it, since I was new to the show and I wasn't really into the pairing between Lori and Bobby, but after thinking about it now, with Lori and Bobby wanting nothing to do with their two families for causing a havoc, honestly, they've become more closer to where it's difficult to admit that the breakup in Season 10 really felt shocking, because even if it may be shocking for new fans, for old fans like me, they didn't remember how good the development was between Lori and Bobby in the earlier seasons after Save the Date. As far as I'm concerned, once we get back to living the dreamboat, there are multiple problems that I have with it to where it's difficult to admit that the moments between Lori and Bobby felt heartwarming. I mean, it is heartwarming, but only if you don't remember anything that happened before. In the spin-off, Bobby had 2 episodes with Loey from Season 1 and Season 2. And in the episode, well, he has to take care of the Mikado while his siblings aren't available, despite the fact that he really wanted them to take care of the Mikado while dealing with Loey that he kept abandoning at the restaurant. Honestly, this episode showcases Bobby in the ultimate right with the writing that he is provide. While Loey isn't terribly written in this episode compared to Save the Date, it puts into the point of view of Bobby of carrying the relationship on his part. As much as him being wrongfully called out is a problem with this episode, at the very least, it showcases that he's attempting to make things right for Loey, to where that his life in the Mikado kind of makes sense on his dream on going to Mexico, on opening the Mikado there, but more on that later. In T-Doff, witnessing Yuen being close to Loey, and he feels that Loey marries Yuen in the future, basically the advice that he got from Carl and Sergio, which is sarcastic. He goes out of his way to prove to Loey that he is better than Yuen, even if it's sabotaging the golf game. This is, in my opinion, showcases Bobby's best traits when it comes to jealousy. And while, yes, it was a misunderstanding that Yuen is technically married, and the fact that all of this would have been avoided if he picked up the pieces right away, but I can give this episode a pass, knowing full well that it showcases Bobby's character on trying to be smart, which he is in this, but compared to Living the Dreamboat, this is an indicator that T-Doff really aged more better, while making Living the Dreamboat difficult to see at face value. Material like this made me see that Bobby is capable of being smart, even though that him sabotaging the golf game with the help of Carlo and Sergio is something that he shouldn't done in the first place. But considering that Loey loves Bobby so much to the point that she sees the good in him more than anyone else, the kissing moments were earned, despite most of them being part of sabotaging. Like, this is one of the reasons onto why I like this ship, because it does showcases how close Loey and Bobby are, and the fact that Loey instantly forgives Bobby, it kind of makes her forgiveness in this more understandable compared to her forgiveness in Living the Dreamboat. In Day of the Dad, Loey encounters Bobby's father, and since that he's the only character that she hasn't met when it comes to Bobby's family, what she's trying to accomplish due to Bobby's dad having his memories lost, it really sums up a lot that she really attempts to make a good impression. But unfortunately, due to this balancing to happen, it's honestly a lose-lose situation for her. And what made me appreciate Loey's character in this is the fact that she's just trying to make things right in order to be close with Bobby, and yet at the same time, it always makes me think that with how Bobby's dad was developed when it comes to his relationship with Maria, yeah, I'm pretty sure that if the incident between him and Loey didn't happen, he wouldn't even have a reason to go against Loey. Truthfully, this episode kind of explains onto why Bobby's character got dumber because of the memory wipe that he had by getting into the puddle, and upon getting back into the puddle again, after being shoved, that is, his memory came back, which the same thing wouldn't apply to Bobby, but at the same time, his memory wiping is probably effective nearly every time to, well, it's kind of avoidable to be smarter if you were in his position, which I'm going to assume that love is the only thing that Bobby can remember with this flaw, but that just makes this a little bit more difficult for me to see of how he was established in the breakup arc, which the Living the Dreamboat episode wants to showcase Bobby at his best, but with the problems that I have with this breakup arc, there is just too much for me to look at the good. When I said that Loie marrying to Bobby is her dream, well, it should have stuck to her regardless of people saying that Loie becoming a school teacher in her third episode of the breakup arc by becoming a college dropout. I would think about that more if we actually explore more on that when it comes to Bobby's part, because with everything that these two characters went through together, it just feels awkward to see them being put in the position of Loie abandoning Garth, which has no effect on her relationship with Bobby when it comes to her being in love with Bobby, and when it comes to Bobby having a job opportunity in Mexico by running a mercado there. There should have been a lot going on with his life. Like, this is the first time we get to see Mexico again since the Casagrande movie. I may neglected to mention that in my breakup video, but unfortunately, with how little impact all of this is despite the setup that we've seen before, it's honestly difficult that if you remember those setups and you go into this episode after watching the episodes between these two, it's really difficult to admit that this was bound to happen. The thing is that people who ship Loie and Bobby really feel like that the breakup between the two would have meant something if it wasn't what we ended up getting. Like, with how close that these two characters are when it comes to the screen time and moments, you can always feel like that the breakup needs to be more memorable to the point that it can easily top not only the breakup from Save the Date, but also their breakup from the live action series. Less we say about that, the better. And to be fair, this breakup is better than those two, but it still isn't the best breakup. As far as I'm concerned, every time that I come back to moments involving Living the Dreamboat and seeing Bobby attempting to win Loie over despite being in disguise, the fact that this episode barely makes Bobby better in order to showcases how far he has come really makes the moments that he has with Loie a little too difficult if we ignore Loie's point of view completely. With his goal on impressing Loie on how heartfelt he is, I would feel like that moments happening off-screen in the earlier seasons is a problem that shippers may witness while watching this episode for the first time. And while I didn't witness that ideal itself when it comes to the major issues in this arc, that's really what makes this difficult to take at face value, even if it's not terrible. Like, you can say that with Loie attempting to have a different direction in life by ditching college in order to become a school teacher can be a good direction, but when you take into consideration that Garth may be the reason onto why these two became a couple, then no, I don't believe that. Bobby moving to Mexico when it comes to the job opportunity, yes, but considering that Loie isn't fully scared of the idea of having her boyfriend being way farther away, then I can say for a fact that her being uninterested with Bobby and they agree to break up just feels more shallow when you remember the moments that they had previously. The last episode they shared together was from season 9, where they're taking care of a kitty and they adopt the kitty as their son or daughter. And this just makes me to believe that they completely forgot of how they made this episode really good, to where you can see that they're planning on having Lori and Bobby becoming mother and father. So the fact that this episode just easily gets retconned in a way where it is just trying to make the breakup arc work, then it just kind of makes everything else beforehand another retcon for the sake of all this to work. Am I being too harsh on it? Yes, but really, when you remember these moments between the two, and then we ended up going into the breakup arc, well, the whole breakup thing just feels too shallow than it needs to be. His moments with Lori in Living the Dreamboat would have been better if it had better writing. Like, imagine if Bobby witnesses Lori's boyfriend that she showcases on social media. What do you think that Bobby will react to if he found out about this? He would be heartbroken to the point that he would be in a position where he can't be able to get out. And if it's been revealed that the whole pairing was just a makeup and a lie from Lori's part, it would have made Lori a terrible character in front of Bobby, to the point that the breakup that happened would just feel like that this whole thing would have been a stupid misunderstanding that didn't really need to happen to begin with. And truthfully, if Lori's nightmare is not to get married with Bobby, then Bobby's nightmare would be him not marrying Lori if he doesn't get the chance. I really wanted to take the whole Bobby taking the job opportunity in Mexico seriously, with it being farther away from Lori, but unfortunately, this is a showcase that they could have built this up when it comes to having an episode dedicated to Bobby exploring Mexico to see new things rather than just walking in the Mercado, because it only convinces me that him working at the Mercado is literally his only contribution when it comes to Mexican culture, which isn't really a bad thing, but it's less for his character of the culture itself. And honestly, what makes this less serious when it comes to distances, not only that Lori manages to get to Mexico quickly by the time Bobby comes back to the Mercado, but also the Loud family and the Casagrande. Truth be told, they don't make Great Lake City nor Mexico farther away than they should. Cartoon logic or not, the impact of having characters being separated in far distances is really important, and the fact that this episode isn't even bothering on having the idea of Lori living in the United States, living farther away from Bobby, who's possibly living in Mexico, then why should I take her stress seriously? Like, cartoon logic needs to have limits when it comes to characters living farther away from each other. If anything, this is more of a retcon compared to Lori driving back and forth in Great Lakes Freakouts by getting more of her siblings, which will have taken more than half a day to accomplish. This problem alone sums up a lot that the slice of life nature makes it difficult to take at face value when they're not attempting to make the environment that has nothing to do with fantasy elements legitimately seriously for the characters. When you have an established couple being centered focus in this arc when it comes to them breaking up, you need to add more material to it rather than just having them break up and basically having one of the characters do most of the development, but also bad development, while having the other character get the development in the final episode that had no lead up to it. Even with the details put into mind upon watching this episode, the episode really feels like it's thinking otherwise in order to set up its own rules in order to make it work, which, for someone who really appreciates the ship more, while, again, this didn't ruin the ship for me, it still didn't do anything better. This is why that I've stated that Lincoln is best Cupid, because the fact that he is slightly better than literally everyone else in this arc when it comes to how he tries to guide Bobby, and most of the best moments from Living the Dreamboat is mainly the pairing between Lincoln and Bobby, sums up a lot that I'm looking into this more than the actual pairing that was supposed to focus on. Truthfully, without Bobby, especially without the assistance of Lincoln, with Loie pairing up with Jet and she learns about the red flags about him, honestly, Loie will probably be stuck on the boat for a while, and the only solution for her is, like, she planned going to Germany's house, but without Bobby, she'll most likely just go back home and just be single while not thinking about Bobby whatsoever. If you really think about it, if Loie was the only character in the family that is on the boat, I'm pretty sure that she will probably have an adventure of her own when it comes to getting back to Bobby. It wouldn't include the necklace or bracelet that Bobby made for her, but if it gained more episodes on having Loie see something that she didn't realize until she lost it, then she would have gone back to Bobby with him being at Mexico. That could be something interesting to see, knowing full well that Loie really wants Bobby, and yet she didn't realize that what she had before is gone. Even though it won't showcases Bobby's character that much, in a way, it would at least showcases him being in the same position of wanting to marry Loie, and also him confessing her that he really wants to marry her. Are they still too young to get married as adults? Yes, but truthfully, that is something that I expected from this breakup arc, which really makes the ending of Living the Dreamboat really difficult to take at face value, knowing full well that even if it's not the worst thing that this show did when it comes to execution on the writing, that doesn't automatically mean that I'm on board with it. I don't hate it, I'm just not on board with it due to the poor writing. Truthfully, if this arc also needs to showcase that family is important, they seriously need to do a better job at making the family involved in this arc, which in all honesty, they did not. So it just makes it feel like that people are missing the point that Loie's family is on board with her being with Jet, well, except for Lincoln, and in all honesty, this just makes it more shallow than it needs to be, since that people will probably not pay attention to the moments that I'm focusing on, while regardless of me not focusing on the moments that they're focusing on, you can't convince me that Lincoln knew better by setting Loie up with someone else when he had no idea that Jet was a terrible person towards Loie. If Lenny was in this position, I would still say the same thing. Every time I think about the Dreamboat in this episode, it's a game show, yeah, but at the same time, with how popular it is in this show, they really take relationships at face value with how big the reveal of the winner is. I'm going to be sure for you that if Jet returns in some other way, which is probably unlikely, he will probably not take the separation of Loie from him seriously, in comparison to Bobby, which is a big difference between Jet and Bobby, but at the same time, it just shows to me that they had more to develop on Jet, and yet they didn't even bother to do so completely. So, even if you agree with me or not, living the dreamboat could have been more better, and yet at the same time, it's just too difficult to admit that the other aspects that did work were mostly underwhelming due to the issues of having this breakup arc. This is gonna be a lot more complicated to admit that this was worthwhile if you're a diehard Lori and Bobby shipper, which I'm not. Granted, I do endure the moments here and there, but at the same time, I wouldn't go hardcore on the idea of Lori and Bobby deserving to be an item while ditching basically anything else that happened before, specifically the last 3 Lori episodes. In this breakup arc, that is. I mean, just by thinking that everyone saw Lori with Jet and the fact that we're supposed to forget about that, you really can't convince me that they're gonna move on of Germany, who is in his trailer the whole time, and people mistaking him as the actual winner with Lori, which I'm pretty sure that the Dreamboat production team will have a difficult time convincing people online. And when it's been revealed that it was Bobby the whole time, this shows that this sabotaging of Bobby being part of the cast, despite the fact that he is in disguise, will be more of an issue to where there would have been an investigation which will involve Lincoln, and I can't deny that completely. But if the episode isn't going to bother when it comes to the aftermath, then I'm pretty sure that the Dreamboat is too overpraised, which in a way it's one thing, but at the same time people will probably forgive it for mistakes that happened behind the scenes. So that's everything I have to say about Lori and Bobby. Even though that the breakup arc was problematic and the introduction of the couple from the beginning really had bad implications, I still ship these 2 characters regardless. The despair nature when it comes to the romance is really the beginning of the breakup arc, with it retconning moments before, which isn't as big as it sounds compared to the other romances and shippings that we're going to be getting to much more later, because they are a lot more complicated than this. But we're not done with Lori just yet. There's 2 more characters we need to discuss, next being Clyde McBride, whom had a crush on Lori from seasons 1 through 3. For anyone who remembers this show from the earlier seasons, it would definitely be Clyde's obsession of Lori. When it comes to his nosebleeds, him trying to win Lori's heart, even if it means by kicking Bobby out of the way, which is what ended up happening in Save the Date, which honestly, with material like this being dropped in the following seasons after season 3 is for the best, since that Clyde ended up getting a love interest close to his age, which we're gonna be tackling in the miscellaneous section later in this video. And with this being the age gap relationship when it comes to Clyde's being too younger for Lori, in comparison to the other age gap love material from other cartoons, this was close enough to be acceptable when it comes to Lori handling it maturely, but at the same time what this story arc lacks is an ending. When it comes to Clyde moving on from Lori and Lori accepting it, which in Change of Heart really shows that Lori's insecurities, while nowhere near as bad as the Lori and Bobby breakup arc, it just makes me think that her love life when it comes to 2 people whom aren't on TV that she grew attachment towards, which also includes Lincoln's tutor Hugh, despite being a tutor and not a TV star. Lori really had a difficult time adjusting love, but it really makes me believe that if she was willing to accept Clyde after a change of heart when it comes to him being in love with her, then I don't even think that she has any memory of what Clyde was doing in Save the Date. And truth be told, it just shows to me that there was so much going on when it comes to everyone's problems in Save the Date to where is it really that hard for an actual communication other than romance? Because romance in this episode didn't really win me over whatsoever with any of the characters, including Lori, whom is seeing Clyde hurting her boo-boo bear. Honestly, Lori isn't really protective of her boyfriend to where that in the later seasons it's somewhat showing that she never had that experience, but as far as I'm concerned, this just makes me believe that she really never sees anything in Clyde in comparison to the other love interests from other cartoons, specifically Princess Bubblegum and Wendy, which, despite how problematic those material were, at least that they were fully aware of what was going on, and Lori, on the other hand, didn't until change of heart. I've seen some people, mostly majority of people, discussing of how cringe this dynamic is between Lori and Clyde, and if they actually continue on with this without giving Clyde any development, then this would have been one of the most redundant storylines ever, and the fact that they dropped it after season 3 really shows that they are willing to give Clyde more when it comes to giving him a love interest in season 4, and when it comes to Lori, having her being a better character than how she was from the first season. Unfortunately, when you look into the scenes between these two, well, Clyde is knocked out, and in Change of Heart, well, there's barely interactions, and Lenny is helping Clyde in order to get over his crush towards Lori. I can see that they're trying to build up an episode between the two where Clyde admits that Lori is too old for him, while Lori really wants to focus on her boyfriend. But unfortunately, this arc never had any of that. I mean, it's a good thing that this arc is dropped, but at the same time, I feel like that this would have had a better conclusion rather than having no conclusion at all, considering that people who discuss age gaps in cartoons, this would have been a good example of showcasing of what an ending would be like, in the same veins as Dippo and Wendy confessing in the beginning of season 2. During the time that season 1 and 3 were coming out, this age gap thing was one of the worst things in the show for the majority of fans, and the humor behind it is overrated to where we've seen it so many times in the past. But it would have been okay if we actually get to see a conclusion of Lori telling Clyde facts, which the fact that we never get to see that type of development from Lori and allowing Clyde to have a conclusion in all of this towards his crush sums up a lot that the opportunities were also missed in the earlier seasons. What I appreciate from Change of Heart is that when Clyde isn't selfish, his obsession towards Lori is too strong to get over, to the point that no matter what he does, he ends up becoming too hopeless to get over his crush, to where this is pretty much the episode where he loses a lot of blood, if you want to include the flashbacks. Every time that I see Clyde in this episode, he really wants to move forward, but unfortunately he can't. So when they go to Lenny, this is honestly the only solution, knowing full well that if the other characters attempted to help out Clyde getting over his crush, it would probably be a lot more difficult to have them find another girl close to Clyde's age, which would probably go against him looking for true love his own age in season 4. So Lenny being the only character who is willing to help out, and the fact that this is before she got flamization, is really the only solution. Like, have you ever seen an episode from a different cartoon or show in this case? Well, it has the main characters helping out one of the supporting characters to get over the crush towards someone who is older than them. Granted, it can happen towards characters who are the same age with the other character, but what makes this episode more unique is the fact that it showcases Clyde in a position where he needs to move forward, but unfortunately he can't. It's too soon for him, so later on it will work out when time goes by. Besides, if Clyde spends the day with Loie and they go on the beach, well, Clyde sees Loie in her swimsuit, which he had fancies in one of the episodes from season 1, then he will lose so much blood to the point that he'll never get the image of Loie in her swimsuit out of his mind, to the point that it will become more better than his fantasy, and honestly, there's really no going back, knowing forward that his crush towards Loie would be to the extreme, even if it may be unhealthy. This really makes me see the nature between Loie and Clyde, to the point that after Loie gave him a kiss in 11 Louds of Leapin', it still wasn't enough. Honestly, if it was on the lips, which is out of the question, then it would have been in the same position of what I stated earlier. And as we get into Loie's insecurities on winning Clyde back, really, if they really wanted to have this canon, despite the fact that Loie already has a boyfriend, this just makes me to believe that they should have really had an ending between these two, rather than wrapping it all up with this episode. While it's one thing that Loie's sisters still didn't get the idea of romance by being with someone that they really like, to the point that their idea of Loie liking Clyde isn't problematic to them. The way I see it, it always makes me feel like that they were planning on doing a sequel episode of Change of Heart, to where there's going to be a conclusion of Clyde moving forward, while Loie focusing on her boyfriend Bobby, and we get none of that. Like, you can say that it's not needed, but for me, it really is. This is why I never liked Loie's insecurities the more I think about it, because there's no conclusion. There's no showcasing of her improving to where that looking into the Loie and Bobby arc later on in the series makes it difficult for her that she moved on, even though that life can bring you down, but at the same time, it just really makes Loie's insecurities difficult to get over, to where that Clyde's getting over his crush towards her is honestly the sad reality that we have to live in due to how the direction of this show isn't really consistent. Watching this episode for the first time, despite Loie's character in the second half, it still made me see that Loie just really wants her space from Clyde, and the fact that Clyde can't be able to control himself really makes me side with her a lot more. But when it comes to the second half where she tries to win Clyde's heart, that just goes to show that her love life isn't really developed when it comes to picking one person and sticking to that person. Like, her crush towards Hugh from Study Muffin is one thing, since how hot Hugh is, but when it comes to someone like Clyde, you can't expect me to believe that the whole boy having a crush on an older girl had hidden Loie completely, because without a sequel of Change of Heart, I'm not really convinced. Not even close. It may happen off screen, but that just goes to show that without an ending, it makes Loie's love life a little too difficult to say that it all worked out, when you just think that if Bobby sees any of this type of stuff, then he will probably take it seriously, but then again, the show wouldn't even give him any kind of position on being supportive towards Loie, which sums up a lot of why the Loey and Bobby breakup arc still didn't win me over. And the only thing I can say regarding about Loey and Clyde is that Clyde in Living the Dreamboat watched the Dreamboat with Loey being the star, which you can come to your own conclusions on fanfiction ideals on what Clyde feels since it's off screen, but as far as I'm concerned, this really feels like an ending when it comes to the whole Loey and Clyde age gap material. Would have been a better ending if we had something like this, but apparently, even in the earlier seasons, there are still missed opportunities just as much as the newer seasons. For the other character, it's not a male character. It's actually a female character whom is Loey's rival. It's Carol Pingery. Yeah. If you really think I'm being a little exaggerated, keep in mind that the title of this video is the Dispel Romance and Shipping, not just romance. And there are people who ship Loey with Carol, and looking at it at face value, knowing full well that we barely see Carol other than the season 4 episode, it really makes me feel like that if we live in a world where Loey doesn't have a boyfriend, while Luna may do, and Loey gets paired with a girl, Carol is really the only alternative. Not because of the fact that they both have blonde hair, but mainly the fact that they may have more in common when it comes to their interaction from the season 3 episode. And this just really makes me see that these two are like sister and sister, and yet at the same time more best friends when it comes to reconciling their rivalry. And just by seeing how Carol was betrayed in this episode and in the season 4 episode, they really created a ship that people just don't recognize because the other ships were popular. But for me personally, this really felt like the perfect Loey being shipped with another female while also having that female be her girlfriend. I will admit it's weird, it's off-putting at most, but if this gave Loey a different direction, then I'm pretty sure that her character would have been something else entirely. Like, if the show continued with these two characters just being best friends and nothing more, it would be one thing, but at the same time, the more closer they get, it really feels like the Miley and Lily dynamic from Hannah Montana, which is an odd comparison considering that those characters from that show were never enemies, but I really feel like that the interactions between Loey and Carol would work the more they get closer with each other after they put aside their rivalry. Even though that it does throw away the development that people want from Carol for how much that they really want to return, other than her name getting mentioned, I really feel like that this would still give Carol the side of her that we would want to see if she comes back. And I always figured that with her being closer to Loey in a way while Loey sees something in Carol, honestly, I can't really argue on how Loey will react when it comes to her feelings being more explored towards Carol, which, in a way, when it comes to her feelings towards Bobby, it still works, but on the other hand, if Carol actually lost a competition or something that she ends up beating Loey and then someone else beats her to it, we would actually see a different alternative take when it comes to her interaction with Loey in the season 3 episode. There's nothing wrong of what we ended up getting, but at the same time, if they're willing to take this direction, we will actually get the chance to see more of Carol's character. Not how we would see it, but at the same time, if the ideals are still there, it would still be good if the execution is done right. I mean, I don't ship these two characters completely, but I can probably see how they will work it out if they actually make the potential something interesting. Like, You can say all you want that it would never happen in the same veins as Luna and Sam, but on the other hand, I can't deny that this isn't a bad idea. It really shows that if the execution is done right, then this would be something interesting. It may not be for everyone, and I know that there's going to be anti-Loey and Carol shippers, but the more I look into it, this will probably be a better version of Luna and Sam. Doesn't mean that it's going to be a success, but on the other hand, it would still be slightly better, especially since that we may have Loey's friend group returning in some other way, instead of them disappearing after seasons 1 through 3, which ended up happening permanently once Season 5 came around with Loey moving into college. And that's all I have to say about Loey and her love interests. Well, aside from Carol. All I can say is that compared to the other characters in this video, when it comes to her sisters and especially Lincoln, it's gonna be difficult to admit that her love life is the most complicated, knowing full well that the other characters have complicated love lives, but also having their development being shafted due to creative differences for obvious reasons when it comes to Luna's part, and when it comes to her brother, there's more of a reason onto why she and the other sisters aren't going to be discussed when it comes to their pairing with Lincoln. I'm only going to be discussing one pairing of this topic, so just understand Lincoln and Loey being closer when it comes to being the parents in the Loud House is most likely the examples of people shipping these two, but that's really not enough to justify of how out of control this topic is, but we're going to be saving that way later.